Welcome to the Warp. I'm Jack Rita. In this video, I'm going to be talking about an artifact from Cosmic Encounter called Mobius tubes. This is a classic artifact back in the Eon and Mayfair days when it was called an edict. Mobius tubes has been around since the very beginning. Very important artifact in a game where players can only retrieve ships that they have lost in encounters to the warp at the start of their own encounters, and only one ship at a time. And when you're losing an average of 2 or 3 ships every time you lose an encounter, that can add up very quickly. So what does the Mobius tube do? It frees ships. Play at the start of one of your encounters to free all ships from the warp. Freed ships may return to any of their owners' colonies. So this is going to empty the warp of all of the ships. Now, I know some people get a little bit confused by the last sentence here. Freed ships may return to any of their owners' colonies. And it has made some people wonder, is the Mobius tubes optional? If I play Mobius tubes, can you leave your ships in the warp? And the answer is no. It frees all of the ships. So let's go back and parse all of the words here. Free all ships from the warp, hard stop. The may is talking about any of the colonies. So freed ships may return to any of their owners' colonies. So if you've got some foreign colonies and some home colonies, you can return those ships to the foreign colonies. You can return them to the home colonies. You can do a little mixy-matchy. But what you can't do is say, no, I'm staying in the warp. Who would want to stay in the warp? Well, Warpish might want to stay in the warp. Warpish's whole power is they get to add the ships in the warp to their total as a main player. That includes their ships. So if they've got, a fair number of ships in there, let's say they've got 8 or 9 ships in there, they still have most of their ships out of the warp, and then being able to add +8 or +9 to their encounter total is pretty good. Masochist, of course, wants to, if they've got a good number of ships in the warp, they want to leave them in there. So it should be noted that the alternate timeline Masochist actually can ignore the Mobius tubes. And that would be true of any effect that specifies that it can ignore something, of course, can ignore it. But that's really about it. Lemming, who's from Cosmic Odyssey, they wouldn't want to leave the warp necessarily because their whole power is they can get a foreign colony if they have a certain number of ships in the warp. So Mobius tubes definitely can be used against certain aliens to reduce their effectiveness. But like I said, it's not optional. It is a little bit constrained, though, because you can only play Mobius tubes when you are the offense, and that's an important distinction as well. And only in the regroup. So another important thing to understand about that is that you may be holding on to the Mobius tubes, but it's not your turn. You can't play it. You may be desperate to get those ships out. And sometimes I'm holding the Mobius tubes, and I've got a fair number of ships in there, but other players have more ships. And I say, you know what? I'm not going to play the Mobius tubes. I'm just going to hold on to that. Maybe I can trade it in a deal later on if I think I can get something good out of it, like a foreign colony and maybe some better cards. There are other effects that can get your ships out of the warp, especially if you're using the reward deck. So the Rift cards are great for that. It lets you kind of target the ships. And the interesting thing about the Rifts, of course, is you can release somebody else's ships. If you want to leave your ships in there as Lemming, you can say, I am staying, but I can use the Rift to get those out. But Mobius tubes doesn't. There was another artifact that was added into the game in previous editions called a Warp Break, which was only I get all of my ships out of the warp. And the Warp Break is not really in Cosmic Encounters Fantasy Flight Edition in any form. But like I said, there are other effects that essentially do that. So that's it for Mobius tubes. Let me know what you think of Mobius tubes. Are you glad that there's 2 of them in the Cosmic deck? Any interesting Mobius tubes stories? I know that there are some out there. I've had plenty myself. There was one point where 2 players had all of their ships in the warp, and I did not play Mobius tubes as much as they begged me. And they knew that I had it. And I had a lot of ships in the warp too, but again, that was another one of those circumstances where it was actually better for me to leave 9 or 10 ships in the warp just because everybody else was in dire straits. And if I remember correctly, one of those players was the virus. So he was, counter totals were 0. 0 ships times whatever attack card he played, he was always going to be a 0. And so, yeah, it was a very effective way to overcome extremely powerful alien by just not helping them get their ships out of the warp. That's it for this video. Thanks for watching. We will see you again soon.